Different by design. Studebaker is. Studebaker is. Studebaker is.
Hey everybody, Kyle here again at the Studebaker National Museum. Now I am here in the museum's main level galleries next to this beautiful 1938 Commander convertible sedan. But we're actually going to look at the object next to the car, this 1923 Fry visible gas pump behind me. Now these days we really don't give gas pumps a second look. They are a utilitarian device that deliver a product accurately and efficiently, you hope. And that's fine. Technology has evolved after all, but for a time in the early 20th century, gas pumps were almost works of art unto themselves, and today they are among the most collectible pieces of, we'll call it, automobilia. Now, before we get to this Fry pump here, we have to go back to the very beginning. Now, the earliest gas pumps evolved, as you can probably imagine, from earlier hand pumps used to dispense kerosene for household use. Gasoline was actually a byproduct of kerosene. Now, believe it or not, the invention of the kerosene pump by an S.F. Bowser of nearby Fort Wayne, Indiana, in 1885 was a big deal. Before this, store clerks would literally ladle kerosene from barrels into containers provided by the customers. And this all sounds incredibly dangerous. His pump was not originally designed to service this sort of newfangled gas-powered horseless carriage, but Bowser saw its sort of usefulness at the turn of the century and improved on his pump by adding a hose and later a nozzle, as you can see in this later ad from 1917. Now, these simple pumps would reliably pump gasoline at a general store or hardware store. One crank was about 1 gallon. Now, the first direct fueling station that we know about with a sort of gravity-fed, above-ground tank and hose opened at a bulk oil facility in St. Louis in 1905, and soon you'd see dedicated stations with pumps and underground sort of buried tanks appearing in more places. Now, you could approximate how much gas was going into your car, but there wasn't an external meter or other gauge to really tell you that. The clerk would often put his ear to the car's tank while it was filling to listen for the sound of gas going in, or would look down the hole to check the gas level. In the 1910s, we finally see the addition of a clock face to newly manufactured pumps to measure the amount of gas, though retailers who chose not to buy a new pump could also outfit their older pumps with accessorized clock faces. Now, these innovations came around just as the automobile was becoming more commercially available, and the demand for gasoline was growing quite a bit. So you see new drive-in service stations like we're familiar with today began to appear along roadways really all over the country, especially outside cities. Really because if you're storing large amounts of highly flammable liquid, downtown, it's kind of a fire risk. So now into the late teens and 20s, we enter this era of these big, beautiful, visible gas pumps like our 1923 Fry model, and the Texaco Sky Chief we also have on display here at the museum. The 20s also saw more color being used on pumps and the addition of these glowing globes like you can see on the top of the Fry pump here. Now these acted sort of as a beacon for weary travelers looking to fuel up and also many of them advertised the gasoline manufacturers, like you can see in these examples here. Now the addition of these large cylinders on the top half of the pump was also a giant leap forward. For the first time, customers could see how much gas was being pumped into the chamber before it was dispensed into their vehicles via gravity. Now, these visible pumps replaced the clock-style meter in the 1920s, and around the same time, we also see the first forays into motorized pumping mechanisms versus the old hand-cranked pumping, a feature we should all be very grateful for today. And just like today, there were still accidents at the pump, as we can see here in this 1933 photo with a Studebaker that somehow almost ran over this pump. Now in 1934, the first computer meter was developed by the Wayne Pump Company. This replaced the older clock face style with a new, we'll call it digital display. Now these electric pumps dispensed gasoline and the price per gallon were displayed directly on the face of the pump. By the late 30s, all manufacturers had adopted sort of this computer meter. Pumps in the 30s also decreased in size and embraced sort of the machine aesthetic of the Art Deco period with their geometric shapes and slightly rounded edges, stainless steel, like you can see in these examples here. Now, the big visible tanks on top disappeared, like our Fry model, but many pumps retained a small glass sight glass on the side for increased consumer confidence, so you really knew how much gas was going into your car. Many also still had these glowing globes on the top, though these would also fall out of fashion into the 1940s and 50s. Now, another interesting feature that came out of this era, and one we definitely take for granted today, is the automatic shutoff valve when dispensing gas. This was invented by a New York State resident, Richard Corson, in 1939. Now, going into the 1940s and 50s, pumps became shorter, and more utilitarian. This was largely because post-war cars were lower, and it could be quite an obstacle trying to read the meter from the driver's lower perspective. Shorter, square, sort of box-style pumps with these stainless steel surfaces, sometimes painted, sometimes not, were quite popular. The top part of the pump was often larger, sitting atop sort of a narrower, tapering base with the gasoline company's logo or name sort of emblazoned on there. And these had computerized measurement and precise price calculation, which is what you want. This trend continued on into the 1970s and 80s, and since then the overall design of the humble gas pump has changed very little, though technology marches on. We now have multiple ways to pay for various types of fuels and are often bombarded with short videos and ads on digital screens at the pump. Now the landscape has changed a bit with the addition of electric charging stations for EVs, but I think we'll always have a need to, fill up our tanks, whatever that may look like. So it is my opinion that the gas pump is really not going anywhere anytime soon. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time down the road.
Different by design. Studebaker is. Studebaker is. Studebaker is.